Okay, so we are back, and the light frames have concluded, and we are in the autopilot session events page. And you can see here we're waiting for dawn flats, and it keeps checking the sun altitude, and we'll start the flats um, when that number has reached -8, as you see here. So you can check the log, and which I did, and everything went very smoothly. There weren't any operational issues. And you can see that once the light frames were completed, the telescope did park at 4:05. So once the session is done, this log is saved to a folder, and you can pull that up and go through it in detail, which is also the nice thing about these automation applications. The other thing I wanted to show is show an example of one of the light frame light subs, so you can see what it is that we actually did. This is a program called CCD Inspector, and once the session is completed, I usually will pull up the files in this program and kind of look at all the, for example, your full width half max, which for a hydrogen alpha it's going to be a little weird because there typically are some hot pixels in there that it reads. So we'll just pull up one of these, say this one here, and we'll show you that. And you can see that that there is actually a signal in hydrogen alpha. You can see the spiral arms of the fireworks galaxy here. So this is going to be useful data. So that's kind of cool to see that. And then you just look at a couple of these stars. Here's one here. You can see your full width half max is about 3.6. That's fairly typical for an average seeing night, and which brings up the point of the seeing monitor. And this is what we had during the course of the night, and you can see that for the most part it really fell in sort of this kind of average block here. So it wasn't really great. It wasn't particularly stable. You did have a period around 10:45 where it went up to 3, and a couple of other times where it was maybe above 2.5, but this kind of gives you an idea. Typically, I would say we're about maybe an arc second above the seeing in terms of our actual results. For hydrogen alpha, for a color channel, it's something that we certainly can accept. If it was luminance, I'm not sure about that, but it wasn't bad. So that kind of tells you what the seeing was doing, and this shows you, yeah, we got a pretty decent signal here for the galaxy in H alpha. So that's kind of what we do to inspect images at the end. We're going to, here is the last subframe. You can see that the focusing really was at 7:09 the last time it refocus, and I do have it doing that every hour. So that is also a reflection of the seeing being kind of marginal there. But we're still good with wind and humidity on the boltwood. So we're going to come back at the dawn flats, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so we're exposing our west side flats, and you can see here on the session page of CCD Autopilot, we're up to exposure 11 of 15. One thing I wanted to point out was the program does carry out a maneuver called dithering, which is what you see here, where it kind of moves the telescope after every exposure. There's a fair amount of movement during the flats, and the reason for that is that there sometimes can be some stars that show up in the exposure, since you are taking sky flats. And what happens is, if you have that, you don't want that to show up in your final master flat. So by shifting or moving the telescope between exposures, when you do your calibration, the stars typically are factored out. So that's why it does that. We're just about done here. We're on exposure 12. Here's our telescope. And you can see for the east, or rather for the west flats, it's pointed, looks like slightly west of the zenith. There's the moon. And we are just about done here. A couple more exposures, and then what will happen is the telescope will park. So it is going to do that, but the roof is not going to close until I actually close it. The other useful thing is the all-sky camera. Even though the projected weather is for clear skies, you will get sometimes thin clouds, or in the morning you get some cloud cover, and if that happens, you might have to abort your sky flats for the morning. So that's another useful application of the all-sky camera. So we're on exposure 14 now. It will expose down to go down to about 3 seconds. If the exposure required is less than that, it will abort the flats. And it looks like we're well above that, so we should be able to complete that. And once this is done, we will watch the telescope park, which the automation program will have it do. So this is our last flat exposure. Just about sunrise now. It's on maybe a few minutes after that. But we are using the HA filter, so probably that helps. And so that's our last exposure, and you'll see the telescope will park, which is what it's doing now, and we can watch that happen. And the park position again is set to be flat, and the reason for that is if you notice here, I have these panels on the south wall of the observatory, and that enables me to drop these down if I want to do any imaging of targets that are in the southern sky, particularly in the summer when you have the Milky Way overhead. There's a lot there that we are interested in imaging. So in order to see that, the piers had to be set higher, and as a result, the telescopes have to be parked flat. And you can see here, the telescope is parked, and we'll confirm that, and as it says, the session is completed. So session is completed. Here's our last flat frame, and if you look at this, the telescope has parked. It's not connected, and what we're going to do now is we're going to close the roof. So here's our sky roof program. Roof is open. We're going to close that now, and let's go to Observatory 1, or rather Pier 1, and we'll watch the roof close, and here you can see it closing. So our session is essentially completed, and I appreciate you checking in with us. I realize this is a fairly lengthy recording going through all of the steps here. So the roof is closed, and it says roof closed. The open tab is active, and so we're going to close the program. And so that concludes our imaging session. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, you can enter those on the blog page, or I think this will be on YouTube, and I think there's a way to ask questions on that. So once again, thanks, and hope you continue to tune into the blog, and happy imaging.